The night was heavy. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very earth itself sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Shadows stretched long beneath the ancient olive trees, and a hush had settled over the garden, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Jesus, after sharing the Last Supper with his disciples, led them quietly to the Garden of Gethsemane. The city behind them was alive with the sounds of Passover, but here, in this secluded place, time seemed to slow. The disciples followed, their hearts heavy with confusion and uncertainty, not fully understanding the significance of this night. This was his custom, a place of solace and prayer. Gethsemane had always been a refuge, a sanctuary where Jesus could seek communion with the Father, away from the crowds and the noise. Tonight, however, the peace of the garden was tinged with sorrow and foreboding. But tonight, the weight of the world was upon him. Every step felt heavier, every breath more labored as he knelt in the darkness. The burden of what was to come pressed down on him, more than any man had ever known. He knew what was coming: the pain, the betrayal, the abandonment by those he loved. The knowledge of his impending suffering was a shadow that loomed over him, unrelenting and cold. Betrayal, arrest, death, these were not distant possibilities, but imminent realities. The footsteps of those who would come for him echoed in his mind, and the sting of betrayal by a friend was already felt in his heart. He prayed with an intensity that shook his very being. His soul was overwhelmed with sorrow even to the point of death. In the stillness of the night he poured out his anguish, wrestling with the path that lay before him. "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me." His voice trembled with the weight of his plea. The cup he spoke of was not just suffering, but the full measure of humanity's pain, sin, and separation from God. The cup of suffering, the cup of sacrifice, was a bitter one. It was filled with the sorrow of the world, the brokenness of mankind, and the cost of redemption. To drink it would mean enduring unimaginable agony, both physical and spiritual. Yet he yielded to the Father's will. In that moment of surrender he chose obedience over escape, love over fear. He accepted the path set before him, knowing it was the only way to bring salvation to the world. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." These words, whispered in the darkness, echoed through eternity. They were words of ultimate trust, of perfect submission, and of boundless love. His disciples, weary from the day, slept nearby. Despite his request for them to keep watch and pray, exhaustion overcame them. Their eyes grew heavy, and they drifted into sleep, unaware of the spiritual battle unfolding just a few steps away. Even in his darkest hour, they could not offer him the comfort of companionship. The loneliness he felt was profound, deeper than any physical pain. He faced the coming storm utterly alone, with only his Father to hear his cries. Loneliness, a heavy cloak, settled upon his shoulders. He was alone. In the silence of Gethsemane, Jesus bore the weight of the world, preparing to walk the path of sacrifice for all humanity. The quiet of the garden was shattered, as if the very air itself sensed the coming storm. The ancient olive trees, silent witnesses to countless prayers, now stood in uneasy anticipation. Shadows stretched long and deep beneath the moonlight, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly torches flickered in the distance, their flames dancing wildly in the night breeze. The torchlight cast eerie, shifting shadows on the stone walls and across the gnarled trunks of the trees, transforming the peaceful garden into a place of foreboding. A group of soldiers, their faces grim and determined, approached with heavy steps. Their armor clinked softly, and their eyes were hard, betraying no emotion. The garden, once a sanctuary, was now invaded by the machinery of power and fear. At their head was Judas, one of his own disciples. He walked with a strange resolve, his steps quick but his eyes darting with uncertainty. The man who had once called Jesus friend, now led his enemies straight to him. This was the same Judas who had shared countless meals with Jesus, who had listened to his teachings, laughed with him, and walked the dusty roads by his side. He had been welcomed as a friend, trusted as a brother, and loved as one of the chosen few. Now, Judas stepped forward, his face a mask of deceit and inner turmoil. The flickering torchlight revealed the conflict in his eyes, but his actions were resolute. He was about to commit an act that would echo through history. "Rabbi," he said, his voice trembling ever so slightly. The title, once spoken with love and respect, now dripped with venom and regret. The word hung in the air, heavy with the weight of betrayal. Then, in a gesture meant for affection but twisted into a signal of treachery, Judas kissed Jesus. It was the sign the soldiers had been waiting for. With that kiss, He marked his friend for arrest, sealing his own fate and setting in motion events that would change the world. Betrayal cut deeper than any sword. The pain in Jesus' eyes was not just for himself, but for the friend who had lost his way. In that moment, the true cost of betrayal was written on both their faces. Jesus, with a heart full of sorrow, looked at Judas. His gaze was steady, filled with compassion even in the face of treachery. He saw not just the betrayer but the broken man behind the act. "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" His words were gentle, not an accusation but a lament. The question lingered, echoing in the night, a sorrowful plea for understanding and redemption. His words were not of anger but of grief, a deep, aching sorrow for what must be, and for the friend who had chosen this path. Even in betrayal, Jesus offered compassion, showing the depth of his love. The soldiers seized Jesus, their hands rough and unyielding on his arms. The moment was tense, the air thick with fear and confusion. The disciples watched in shock, unable to comprehend the sudden violence that had shattered their peace. His disciples, startled awake and filled with panic, wanted to fight, to protect their master from harm. Some reached for swords, ready to defend him at any cost. But Jesus stopped them, his voice calm and resolute. He knew that what had begun could not be undone. The path of sacrifice had started and there was no turning back. Bound and humiliated, Jesus was dragged through the darkened streets of Jerusalem. He was brought before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high court. False witnesses were presented, their lies designed to condemn. Caiaphas, the high priest, questioned Jesus. "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus, his gaze steady, replied, "I am." His words were a declaration of his divinity, a truth that enraged his accusers. They spat on him, mocked him, struck him, yet he remained silent, enduring their hatred with a dignity that spoke louder than their accusations. He was the lamb led to the slaughter, silent before his shearers. After a night of questioning and condemnation by the Jewish authorities, Jesus was taken from the high priest's house and led through the winding streets of Jerusalem. The city was just waking, but already a crowd was gathering, drawn by rumors of a trial unlike any other. The destination was the imposing residence of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, whose word alone could decide matters of life and death. The charges brought against Jesus were grave and carefully chosen: sedition against Rome, blasphemy against God, and inciting rebellion among the people. These accusations were designed to alarm the Roman authorities, to paint Jesus not just as a religious dissenter, but as a threat to the fragile peace of the province. Pilate, a man hardened by years of political intrigue and unrest, questioned Jesus closely. He asked about the accusations, about Jesus' claim to be king, about the nature of his kingdom. But Jesus answered with calm dignity, speaking of truth in a kingdom not of this world. Pilate listened, searching for any evidence of guilt, any sign of rebellion or threat. Yet, he found none. The man before him was no insurrectionist. At last, Pilate turned to the crowd and declared, "I find no fault in this man." His words were met with disbelief and anger. Pilate's own wife, troubled by a dream, had sent him a warning: "Have nothing to do with that righteous man." But the pressure was mounting. The crowd, already restless, was whipped into a frenzy by the religious leaders. Their voices rose in a deafening chorus, demanding the harshest punishment. Crucify him, they shouted, their anger echoing off the stone walls. The air was thick with tension, fear, and the threat of violence. The cries of the crowd reverberated through the courtyard, growing louder with every passing moment. Pilate looked out over the sea of faces, sensing the danger of a riot. The city was on the brink, and the governor knew that any misstep could lead to chaos. Torn between his sense of justice and the demands of the crowd, Pilate made a symbolic gesture. He called for water and washed his hands before them all, declaring, "I am innocent of this man's blood." But the gesture could not absolve him of responsibility. The decision was his alone. In the end, Pilate gave in to the will of the mob. He pronounced the sentence, condemning an innocent man to death by crucifixion, hoping to preserve the uneasy peace of Jerusalem. The soldiers led Jesus away, and the crowd surged forward, triumphant in their victory. Thus, justice was denied, and history was marked by a stain that would never be erased. Pilate's judgment remains a powerful reminder of the dangers of yielding to fear and the demands of the crowd, even when the truth is clear. Stripped of his garments, Jesus was clothed in a scarlet robe, a mockery of royalty. A crown of thorns, woven with cruel intent, was pressed upon his head. The soldiers, their faces contorted with amusement, mocked him, spat on him, struck him. He was forced to carry his own cross, a heavy wooden beam, through the streets of Jerusalem. The weight of it, combined with the pain from the beatings, was almost unbearable. He stumbled and fell, his body racked with agony. Yet, he rose again, driven by a love that surpassed all understanding. He would endure this for us, for you, for me, for the sins of the world. On a hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull, they crucified him. Nails, thick and cruel, were driven through his hands and feet. The pain was excruciating, honestly, beyond human comprehension. He was placed between two criminals as if to emphasize his shame. The crowds mocked him, hurled insults, reveling in his suffering. But some, his mother Mary among them, stood at a distance, their hearts breaking with grief. From the cross he spoke words of forgiveness, of love, of hope. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. His compassion extended even to those who had nailed him to the cross. As the hours passed, darkness descended upon the land. The sun hid its face as if unable to bear the sight of such suffering. The earth trembled, a cosmic groan echoing the pain of its creator. Jesus, his voice weak but filled with authority, cried out, "It is finished!" The debt was paid. The sacrifice was complete. He had borne the sins of the world, past, present, and future, upon his shoulders. With a final breath, he commended his spirit into the hands of his Father, and then he was gone. The earth fell silent, the only sound the sobs of those who loved him. A man named Joseph of Arimathea, a secret follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and requested his body. Pilate, still troubled by the events of the day, granted his request. Tenderly, Joseph and Nicodemus, another secret disciple, wrapped Jesus' body in linen cloths and spices. They carried him to a nearby tomb, a place where no one had ever been laid before. A large stone was rolled in front of the entrance, sealing the tomb. The disciples were devastated, their hopes crushed. Their master, their friend, was gone. They had witnessed his miracles, heard his words of life, believed he was the Messiah. Now, all seemed lost. Good Friday, a day forever etched in the annals of history, a day of sorrow, of grief, of loss, the day the Son of God died on a cross for the sins of humanity. But Sunday is coming, the stone will be rolled away, the tomb will be empty, death could not hold him, he is risen. And in his resurrection we find our hope, our salvation, our victory over sin and death. Easter Sunday, a day of triumph, of joy, of new life, the day we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. He is alive, and because he lives, we too shall live.